In the small, sleepy town of Willow Creek, life moved at a pace that seemed almost forgotten by the rest of the world. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. At the heart of this close-knit community stood Sheriff Emma Hayes, a woman whose sharp instincts and unwavering sense of duty had earned her the respect, and sometimes fear, of the townsfolk. For years she had been the guardian of Willow Creek, ensuring that peace reigned supreme. Emma's daughter, Lily, was as different from her mother as night is from day. While Emma thrived on structure and discipline, Lily was a free spirit who loved art, music, and exploring ideas beyond the confines of their little town. A college sophomore studying literature, Lily spent most of her time away from Willow Creek, immersing herself in campus life. But during holidays, she always returned home, eager to reconnect with her roots. Though they were incredibly close, there was an unspoken tension between them, a generational gap that neither fully understood but both accepted. One Friday evening, Lily decided to visit a local bar called the Rusty Spur, a favorite hangout spot for young adults in Willow Creek. It wasn't somewhere she typically went, but tonight, she wanted to let loose after weeks of stressful exams. Her friends convinced her to tag along, promising laughter, good company, and maybe even a chance to meet someone special. The Rusty Spur buzzed with energy when they arrived. Neon lights flickered above the entrance, casting colorful shadows on the gravel parking lot outside. Inside, the air smelled faintly of sawdust and spilled beer, while country music blared through crackling speakers. As the hours passed, Lily found herself having more fun than she expected. She laughed at jokes, danced awkwardly to songs she didn't know, and sipped on a soda because she wasn't much of a drinker. Everything felt carefree until she stepped outside around midnight to get some fresh air. That's when everything changed. The parking lot was dimly lit, with only a single lamppost casting a pale yellow glow over the cracked asphalt. As Lily leaned against the wooden railing near the entrance, she noticed a figure approaching her from the shadows. At first, she thought nothing of it. People came and went all the time, but something about the way he walked made her uneasy. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a dark suit that seemed out of place in such a casual setting. Before she could react, he was standing right in front of her. "Hey," he said, his voice low and steady. There was no hint of malice in his tone, but Lily instinctively took a step back. "You look like you're having a good time," she nodded politely, clutching her purse tighter. "Yeah, I am, thanks." But instead of walking away, he lingered, staring at her in a way that made her skin crawl. When she tried to excuse herself and head back inside, he grabbed her arm, not violently, but firmly enough to stop her. Panic surged through her veins. She pulled away, stumbling backward, and shouted for help. By the time one of her friends rushed out to check on her, the man was already gone, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as he'd appeared. Shaken and confused, Lily recounted what happened to her friends, describing the stranger in detail. They assured her she was safe now and urged her to call her mom. Reluctantly, she dialed Emma's number, tears streaming down her face as she explained everything. Emma arrived within minutes, her expression unreadable but her eyes blazing with fury. She hugged Lily tightly before asking questions about the man's appearance, mannerisms, and anything else that might help identify him. The next morning, armed with Lily's account, Emma began investigating. She reviewed security footage from the Rusty Spur, interviewed staff members, and canvassed the area for potential witnesses. Meanwhile, Lily struggled to process what had happened. She couldn't shake the image of the man in the dark suit or the feeling of his grip on her arm. Every shadow seemed menacing, every sound louder than it should be. It wasn't until later that afternoon that things took an unexpected turn. One of Emma's deputies brought up a name during their briefing: Daniel Cross. According to recent news articles, Daniel, a high-profile prosecutor based in the state capital, had been visiting Willow Creek for a case. His description matched the one Lily had given almost perfectly: tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit. At first, Emma dismissed the idea. It seemed impossible that someone so respected could be involved in such an act. But curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to dig deeper. What she discovered sent shockwaves through her department. Not only did Daniel fit the physical description, but he also had no verifiable alibi for the time of the incident. Worse still, rumors began circulating among the townsfolk, fueled by whispers and speculation. Some believed Daniel must have snapped under the pressure of his demanding career, while others argued that power corrupts even the best of men. Within hours, the story spread like wildfire, reaching far beyond Willow Creek's borders. For Lily, seeing her accusation gain traction was both validating and terrifying. On one hand, she felt relief knowing that people believed her. On the other hand, the weight of accusing someone so prominent terrified her. What if she was wrong? What if this ruined not just his life, but hers too? These thoughts haunted her as she lay awake at night staring at the ceiling and replaying the events over and over again in her mind. Little did anyone know, however, that Daniel Cross wasn't just any man. He was a crusader for justice, known for taking on cases that others deemed hopeless. And though he hadn't yet heard about the accusations against him, his world was about to be turned upside down in ways he never imagined. Unbeknownst to Lily, or anyone else in Willow Creek, the truth was far more complicated than anyone realized. Daniel Cross was not a man who tolerated chaos. Known for his meticulous nature and razor-sharp focus, he had built a career on dissecting the most complex legal cases and emerging victorious. His reputation as the state's top prosecutor was unmatched, earning him admiration from colleagues and fear from adversaries. Yet even someone as disciplined as Daniel couldn't have anticipated the storm that would soon engulf his life. It started with a phone call. Early one Saturday morning, as Daniel sipped his coffee while reviewing notes for an upcoming trial, his assistant called to inform him about troubling news. "There's something you need to see," she said, her voice tense. Moments later, an email landed in his inbox containing screenshots of headlines plastered across local newspapers. The bold letters screamed accusations. Top prosecutor, allegedly. Assaults college student in small-town bar. Daniel froze, his mug halfway to his lips. He blinked once, twice, trying to process what he was reading. How could this be? He hadn't set foot in Willow Creek in months. As details emerged, Daniel realized the gravity of the situation. According to reports, a young woman, Lily Hayes, daughter of Sheriff Emma Hayes, had accused him of assaulting her in the parking lot of a bar called the Rusty Spur. Her description of the suspect matched his appearance almost perfectly. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit. To make matters worse, there was no clear alibi tying him to another location at the time of the alleged incident. Daniel knew how these things worked. In the court of public opinion, perception often outweighed facts. And right now, the scales were tipping dangerously against him. At first, Daniel tried to remain calm. He reminded himself that truth and evidence were on his side. After all, he had been delivering a keynote speech at a legal conference 2 hours away from Willow Creek. On the night in question, dozens of people had seen him there, including respected judges, attorneys, and law enforcement officials. Surely that would be enough to clear his name. But as the day wore on, reality began to sink in. The media frenzy surrounding the case grew louder, painting him as a hypocrite, a man who preached justice but allegedly committed acts of violence behind closed doors. Even some of his closest colleagues hesitated to defend him publicly, unwilling to risk their own reputations until they knew more. Frustrated and feeling cornered, Daniel decided to take control of the situation himself. He reached out to a trusted, private investigator named Roger Mills, a grizzled veteran with decades of experience uncovering hidden truths. Together, they devised a plan to retrace Daniel's steps on the evening of the alleged assault. Their goal was simple: gather irrefutable proof of his whereabouts and expose the real culprit before the accusations destroyed his career, and possibly his life. The investigation began with surveillance footage from the conference where Daniel had spoken. Roger obtained recordings showing Daniel stepping onto the stage, addressing hundreds of attendees, and mingling afterward during a networking session. Several witnesses corroborated his presence, including event organizers and fellow speakers. One attendee even posted photos online of Daniel shaking hands with members of the audience, time-stamped just minutes before Lily claimed the incident occurred. But proving Daniel's innocence wasn't enough. They needed to find out who the real perpetrator was. Using the description provided by Lily, Roger combed through police records and databases, searching for anyone matching the profile. It didn't take long for them to identify a possible suspect. Marcus Reed, a drifter with a long history of violent crimes, including sexual assault. Records showed that Marcus had recently arrived in Willow Creek, hitchhiking his way through neighboring towns. More alarmingly, he had been spotted near the Rusty Spur around the same time as the alleged attack. Armed with this information, Daniel felt a flicker of hope. If they could connect Marcus Reed to the crime, it would not only exonerate him but also bring justice to Lily and her family. However, presenting this evidence wouldn't be easy. Public sentiment was already running high, fueled by sensationalized media coverage. Many people had already made up their minds about Daniel's guilt, unwilling to entertain the possibility of doubt. Convincing them otherwise would require more than just facts. It would demand strategy, timing, and perhaps a bit of luck. Meanwhile, Daniel faced mounting pressure from every direction. Friends stopped returning his calls, fearing association with scandal. His office became a ghost town, with staff avoiding eye contact or whispering behind closed doors. Even routine tasks like grocery shopping turned into awkward encounters, as strangers stared at him with thinly veiled suspicion. At home, sleep eluded him. Nights stretched endlessly as he replayed the events in his mind, wondering how his life had spiraled so far out of control. Despite the turmoil, Daniel refused to give up. He poured every ounce of energy into clearing his name, determined to prove that the justice system he loved so dearly still worked, even for those accused unfairly. Each new piece of evidence brought him closer to the truth, though progress felt agonizingly slow. Still, he held on to hope, clinging to the belief that eventually the truth would prevail. Back in Willow Creek, Sheriff Emma Hayes wrestled with her own internal conflict. As a mother, she wanted nothing more than to support Lily and ensure her safety. But as a law enforcement officer, she couldn't ignore the growing inconsistencies in the case. Something about Daniel's demeanor struck her as genuine, and his explanation of being at a conference seemed plausible. Yet, every time she raised doubts, Lily grew defensive, insisting she was certain of her identification. The tension between them escalated, culminating in heated arguments that left both women emotionally drained. Emma's instincts told her to dig deeper. She revisited the crime scene, scrutinizing every detail overlooked during the initial investigation. Security. Cameras captured glimpses of a shadowy figure lurking near the parking lot, but the images were grainy and inconclusive. Witnesses offered conflicting accounts, further complicating matters. Just when Emma thought she might be chasing ghosts, a breakthrough came unexpectedly. A bartender at the Rusty Spur remembered serving a man fitting Marcus Reed's description earlier that night. Though hazy on specifics, the bartender recalled overhearing him bragging about teaching someone a lesson before leaving abruptly. With this new lead, Emma felt torn. On one hand, pursuing Marcus Reed meant acknowledging the possibility that Lily's accusation against Daniel might be mistaken, a truth neither she nor her daughter was ready to face. On the other hand, ignoring the evidence went against everything she stood for as a sheriff. Caught between duty and loyalty, Emma found herself questioning whether justice truly was blind, or if personal biases clouded its vision. As days turned into weeks, the weight of uncertainty bore down heavily on everyone involved. For Daniel, the fight to reclaim his reputation became a battle, not just for himself but for the principles he had dedicated his life to upholding. For Emma, the struggle to reconcile her roles as a mother and a sheriff tested her resolve like never before. And for Lily, the realization that her actions carried consequences beyond her comprehension loomed ever closer. Unbeknownst to any of them, the path to resolution lay ahead, but it would demand sacrifices, courage, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Only then could the tangled web of accusations, assumptions, and misunderstandings begin to unravel, paving the way for redemption and healing. Sheriff Emma Hayes had always prided herself on being a woman of integrity. Her badge wasn't just a symbol of authority. It was a promise to the people of Willow Creek that she would serve them with fairness and honesty. But now, as she sat, alone in her office late one night, staring at the growing pile of case files spread across her desk, she felt the weight of that promise pressing down on her chest. Never before had her personal life collided so violently with her professional duties. On one side was her daughter Lily, a scared young woman who needed her mother's unwavering support. On the other was Daniel Cross, a man whose reputation and career hung precariously in the balance. And somewhere in between lay the truth, obscured by tangled threads of emotion, perception, and incomplete evidence. Emma's instincts were screaming at her. Something about this case didn't add up. She trusted Lily implicitly. She had raised her, after all, but there were cracks forming in the foundation of the accusation. The more Emma dug into Daniel's background, the harder it became to reconcile the image of him as a cold-blooded predator with the reality of his accomplishments. His record was impeccable. Countless convictions for violent offenders, advocacy work for victims' rights, and glowing testimonials from colleagues who described him as compassionate and fair-minded. If he truly were guilty, wouldn't someone have noticed warning signs along the way? Yet dismissing the possibility entirely felt equally reckless. As a sheriff, Emma couldn't afford to let bias cloud her judgment, not even when it came to her own family. The tension between Emma and Lily reached a boiling point during dinner one evening. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken grievances. Lily pushed her food around her plate, avoiding eye contact, while Emma tried, and failed, to keep her tone neutral. "Lily," Emma began, her voice measured but firm, "I need you to think carefully about what you saw that night. Are you absolutely sure it was Daniel Cross?" Lily's head snapped up, her eyes blazing with anger. "Mom, how can you even ask me that? Of course I'm sure. You're supposed to believe me, not question me like everyone else." "I do believe you," Emma replied, leaning forward. "But believing you doesn't mean ignoring facts. There's new information coming to light, things we need to consider. This isn't just about you or me, it's about making sure justice is served." "Justice?" Lily shot back, her voice trembling. "You call questioning my word justice? Maybe if Dad were here, he'd actually take my side instead of treating me like some criminal." The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. Her husband, Lily's father, had passed away 5 years ago in a car accident, leaving behind a void neither of them had fully healed from. Hearing Lily bring him into the argument was painful, but Emma forced herself to stay composed. "Your Dad would want the same thing I do, for us to find the truth, no matter how hard it is. That's what real justice looks like." Lily stood abruptly, knocking over her chair in the process. "Fine, do whatever you want, just don't expect me to sit here and listen to you doubt me." With that, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Emma sighed heavily, rubbing her temples. She hated fighting with Lily, but she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that they were missing something crucial. Determined to get answers, she returned to the station early the next morning and began reviewing every piece of evidence again. Surveillance footage from the Rusty Spur showed glimpses of a figure matching Daniel's description near the parking lot, but the images were too grainy to confirm identity beyond reasonable doubt. Witness statements varied wildly, with some describing a tall man in a suit and others recalling shorter, stockier individuals. It was maddeningly inconclusive. Then there was Marcus Reed. The drifter Emma had identified as a potential suspect remained an enigma. While his criminal history made him a plausible candidate, connecting him directly to the incident proved challenging without concrete evidence. Emma decided to pay him a visit, hoping to gauge his demeanor firsthand. Tracking him down wasn't easy. He seemed to move through towns like smoke, leaving little trace behind. Eventually, a tip led her to an abandoned barn on the outskirts of Willow Creek. When Emma arrived, the scene was eerily quiet. The barn creaked in the wind, its wooden planks weathered and splintered. Inside, she found Marcus hunched over a small fire, warming his hands. He looked up as she approached, his face shadowed by a scruffy beard and piercing eyes that seemed to bore straight through her. "Marcus Reed?" Emma asked, her hand resting instinctively on her holster. "That's me," he replied, his voice low and gravelly. "What do you want?" "I'm Sheriff Hayes," she said, showing her badge. "We need to talk about where you were last Friday night." Marcus smirked, leaning back against a stack of hay bales. "Friday night? Can't say I remember much. Been traveling a lot lately." "Why? Am I in trouble?" Emma studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. "There was an incident at the Rusty Spur. A young woman says she was assaulted in the parking lot. Witnesses placed someone, matching your description, nearby." For a split second, Marcus's expression faltered, but he quickly masked it with indifference. "Sounds serious. Too bad I wasn't there to see anything. Like I said, I've been on the road." Emma pressed further, asking pointed questions about his movements and habits. Though Marcus remained evasive, certain details caught her attention. His familiarity with the area, his tendency to frequent bars, and his casual admission of having run-ins with women in the past. None of it was enough to arrest him outright, but it strengthened her suspicion that he might be involved. Back at the station, Emma shared her findings with her deputies, urging them to keep a close watch on Marcus. Meanwhile, whispers about the case continued to ripple through Willow Creek. Some residents rallied behind Lily, convinced of Daniel's guilt based solely on the initial accusation. Others, however, began questioning the validity of the claims, pointing out inconsistencies, and calling for a more thorough investigation. The divide grew wider with each passing day, turning the once peaceful town into a battleground of opinions. Caught in the middle of it all was Daniel Cross. Despite mounting evidence supporting his alibi, public sentiment remained largely against him. Local businesses stopped hiring him for cases, fearing backlash from clients. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to risk association with scandal. Even simple tasks like grocery shopping became exercises in endurance, as strangers glared at him or whispered behind his back. Through it all, Daniel maintained his composure, channeling his frustration into action. He worked tirelessly alongside Roger Mills, the private investigator, gathering additional proof of his innocence and piecing together a timeline that left no room for doubt. One evening, as Daniel reviewed surveillance footage from the conference, where he'd spoken, he noticed something he hadn't before. A photographer had captured a candid shot of him exiting the venue, time-stamped precisely 15 minutes before Lily claimed the assault occurred. The location was nearly 2 hours away from Willow Creek, a fact that should have exonerated him immediately. Excited by the discovery, Daniel sent the photo to Emma, hoping it might finally shift the narrative in his favor. When Emma received the image, she studied it intently. It was clear, undeniable proof of Daniel's whereabouts at the critical moment. Yet presenting it publicly posed risks. Doing so might cast doubt on Lily's credibility, potentially alienating her from the community and damaging their already fragile relationship. Still, Emma knew she couldn't ignore it. Justice demanded transparency, regardless of personal causer. That night, Emma sat down with Lily once more, this time armed with the photograph and a renewed sense of purpose. She explained everything calmly, emphasizing that uncovering the truth wasn't about undermining Lily's experience, but ensuring the right person was held accountable. At first, Lily resisted, tears streaming down her face as she accused her mother of choosing Daniel over her. But as Emma gently guided her through the evidence, pointing out discrepancies in her account and highlighting Marcus Reed's suspicious behavior, Lily's resolve began to waver. By the end of their conversation, Lily was visibly shaken. For weeks, she had clung to her version of events, terrified of admitting she might have made a mistake. Now, faced with irrefutable facts, she realized the enormity of what she had done. Accusing an innocent man, not just anyone, but someone, as respected as Daniel Cross, had consequences far beyond her comprehension. The weight of guilt settled heavily on her shoulders, leaving her unsure of how to make amends. As dawn broke over Willow Creek, Emma stood outside her house, watching the sun rise over the hills. The road ahead promised to be difficult, filled with challenges and sacrifices. But for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Finding the truth wouldn't erase the pain caused by this ordeal, but it could pave the way for healing, for Lily, for Daniel, and for the entire town. All it required was courage, patience, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable realities head-on. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty for everyone involved. For Lily, the realization that she might have made a grave mistake weighed heavily on her mind. The guilt gnawed at her constantly, keeping her awake at night and making it hard to focus during the day. She replayed the events in her head over and over again, trying desperately to recall every detail from the parking lot of the Rusty Spur. Had she really seen what she thought she did? Or had fear clouded her judgment, leading her to accuse an innocent man? Meanwhile, Sheriff Emma Hayes worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle. Her instincts told her that Marcus Reed was hiding something significant, but without concrete evidence tying him directly to the incident, she couldn't move forward with an arrest. Determined not to let the case slip through her fingers, Emma decided to dig deeper into Marcus's past. What she uncovered sent chills down her spine. Marcus Reed wasn't just a drifter with a criminal record. He was a predator who thrived on chaos. His history included multiple arrests for assault, stalking, and harassment, many of which had been dismissed due to lack of evidence or witnesses too afraid to testify. One particularly disturbing pattern emerged. Marcus often targeted young women, exploiting their vulnerability and using intimidation tactics to silence them. It became clear to Emma that if Marcus was responsible for the attack on Lily, he wouldn't hesitate to strike again unless stopped. Armed with this information, Emma requested additional resources from neighboring counties to monitor Marcus's movements more closely. Deputies staked out locations he frequented, including bars, truck stops, and abandoned buildings where drifters sometimes gathered. They also reached out to potential victims from his past, encouraging them to come forward and share their stories. Slowly but surely, a clearer picture began to emerge, one that pointed squarely at Marcus as the likely perpetrator. Simultaneously, Daniel Cross continued his own efforts to clear his name. With the help of Roger Mills, the private investigator, he compiled a comprehensive dossier proving his innocence. This included not only the time-stamped photograph of him leaving the conference venue, but also affidavits from dozens of witnesses, who confirmed his presence throughout the evening. To bolster his case further, Daniel arranged for independent verification of the event schedule, ensuring there could be no doubt about when and where he had been. Despite these developments, public opinion remained stubbornly divided. Many residents of Willow Creek still clung to the belief that Daniel must somehow be guilty, unwilling to entertain the possibility of error. Rumors swirled like wildfire, fueled by sensationalized media coverage and baseless speculation. Even those who initially doubted the accusation began to waver under the relentless pressure. For Daniel, navigating this hostile environment felt like walking through quicksand. Every step forward seemed to drag him deeper into despair. One afternoon, while reviewing surveillance footage from the Rusty Spur yet again, Emma noticed something peculiar. A grainy image captured near the parking lot showed a figure standing partially hidden behind a car. At first glance, the person appeared to match Daniel's description, a tall man in a dark suit. But upon closer inspection, subtle differences became apparent. The angle of the shoulders, the way the figure leaned slightly to one side, it didn't quite align with Daniel's posture. Could this be Marcus Reed instead? Emma immediately called Roger Mills to share her findings. Together they enhanced the footage using specialized software, zooming in on key details until the figure came into sharper focus. Though the resolution was far from perfect, certain characteristics stood out. Shorter hair, broader features, and a slight limp, all traits consistent with Marcus's profile. Excited by the discovery, Emma knew this could be the break they needed. With renewed determination, Emma confronted Marcus once more. This time, she arrived at the barn accompanied by two deputies, ready to take him into custody if necessary. As they entered, Marcus looked up, his expression unreadable. When Emma presented the enhanced footage and detailed his suspicious behavior, his mask of indifference finally cracked. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Marcus sneered, crossing his arms defiantly. "But you've got nothing on me. No proof, no witnesses, just your hunches." Emma held his gaze steadily. "We'll see about that," she replied coolly. "You're coming with us." Though Marcus resisted at first, the presence of the deputies left him little choice. Back at the station, Emma subjected him to hours of intense questioning, probing for inconsistencies in his story. Despite his attempts to deflect blame, cracks began to show. He admitted to being near the Rusty Spur that night but claimed he was simply passing through. When pressed about why he hadn't mentioned this earlier, he grew increasingly agitated, eventually lashing out in frustration. As the interrogation dragged on, another breakthrough occurred. One of the deputies discovered a crucial piece of evidence hidden in Marcus's belongings, a torn piece of fabric matching the material of Lily's jacket. Laboratory tests later confirmed traces of her DNA on the cloth, providing irrefutable proof that Marcus had indeed been in close proximity to her during the alleged attack. For Emma, this revelation was both vindication and validation. All her doubts, all her instincts, they had led her here, to the truth. But delivering justice wouldn't be easy. Arresting Marcus meant admitting that Lily's accusation against Daniel was mistaken, a truth neither mother nor daughter was fully prepared to face. That evening, Emma sat down with Lily once more, this time bringing along the mounting evidence against Marcus. She explained everything carefully, emphasizing that uncovering the truth wasn't about blaming Lily, but ensuring accountability for the real culprit. At first, Lily struggled to accept the reality of her mistake. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed how terrified she had been that night, how convinced she was that Daniel was the man who had grabbed her arm. But as Emma gently guided her through the facts, pointing out discrepancies in her account and highlighting Marcus's predatory behavior, Lily's resolve began to crumble. "I never wanted any of this to happen," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "I was so scared. I thought I saw him. I swear I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Emma pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, holding her as she sobbed. "I know, sweetheart, and we'll fix this together. But we have to tell the truth. Not just for Daniel, but for ourselves." By the end of their conversation, Lily agreed to recant her statement publicly, acknowledging her error and apologizing for the damage caused. It was a painful decision, one that would expose her to scrutiny and criticism. Yet deep down, she knew it was the right thing to do. As dawn broke over Willow Creek, Emma stood outside her house, watching the sun rise over the hills. The road ahead promised to be difficult, filled with challenges and sacrifices. But for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. Finding the truth wouldn't erase the pain caused by this ordeal, but it could pave the way for healing, for Lily, for Daniel, and for the entire town. All it required was courage, patience, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable realities head-on. The morning after Lily's emotional confession to her mother, Sheriff Emma Hayes called an emergency press conference at the Willow Creek police station. News of the gathering spread quickly through the town, drawing a crowd that spilled out onto the steps of the building. Reporters jostled for position, cameras clicked incessantly, and murmurs rippled through the audience as everyone waited anxiously to hear what Emma had to say. The tension in the air was palpable. This was the moment when the truth would finally come to light. Standing behind a podium adorned with the department's emblem, Emma took a deep breath before addressing the crowd. Her voice was steady but heavy with emotion as she began speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today. Over the past few weeks, our community has been deeply affected by allegations involving a serious crime. As your sheriff, it is my duty to ensure that justice is served, not just for the accused, but for everyone involved." She paused, scanning the sea of faces before continuing. "After conducting a thorough investigation, We have uncovered evidence pointing to Marcus Reed as the individual responsible for the incident outside the Rusty Spur. Mr. Reed, who has a documented history of violent behavior, is currently in custody and will face charges related to this case. Furthermore, she hesitated briefly, steeling herself for the next part. We must acknowledge that Daniel Cross, the man initially accused, was not present at the scene of the alleged assault. His alibi has been verified beyond any reasonable doubt. A murmur swept through the crowd, some gasping in shock while others exchanged skeptical glances. Emma raised her hand to quiet them before continuing. I understand that this revelation may be difficult to accept, especially given the emotions surrounding this case. However, it is imperative that we confront the facts honestly. Mistakes were made, and I take full responsibility for ensuring that those mistakes are corrected. With that, she stepped aside, signaling for Lily to join her at the podium. The young woman walked forward hesitantly, clutching a folded piece of paper in trembling hands. Her eyes darted nervously across the crowd, searching for familiar faces but finding only judgmental stares. Taking another shaky breath, she unfolded the paper and began to read aloud. I want to start by saying how sorry I am, Lily began, her voice barely above a whisper. When I identified Daniel Cross as the person who attacked me, I truly believed I was telling the truth. But as more information came to light, I realized that I made a terrible mistake. What I thought I saw wasn't real. It was dark. I was scared, and in my panic I misidentified someone who didn't deserve to be accused. Her words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she continued, her voice growing stronger despite the weight of her guilt. Daniel Cross is innocent. He was never near the Rusty Spur that night, and because of my error, his life has been turned upside down. For that I am deeply, deeply sorry. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the entire town was holding its collective breath. Finally, Lily looked up from her notes and addressed the crowd directly. I know I can't undo the harm I've caused. All I can do is tell the truth now and hope that justice can still be done. For Daniel, for Marcus's victims, and for myself. Thank you for listening. As Lily stepped away from the podium, the room erupted into a cacophony of questions shouted by reporters eager to dissect every detail. Emma quickly intervened, cutting off the chaos with a firm reminder that the investigation was ongoing and further updates would follow in due course. Once the press conference ended, the fallout began almost immediately. For Daniel Cross, the public apology brought both relief and frustration. On one hand, he was grateful to finally have his innocence acknowledged. On the other hand, the damage to his reputation had already been done. Friends and colleagues who had distanced themselves during the height of the scandal were slow to reach out, their support tempered by lingering doubts. Some even questioned whether Lily's apology was genuine or merely an attempt to save face. Despite these challenges, Daniel remained resolute, determined to rebuild trust and prove that his dedication to justice had never wavered. In the days that followed, the focus shifted to Marcus Reed. Prosecutors worked tirelessly to build a strong case against him, using the torn fabric from Lily's jacket and eyewitness accounts to establish his presence at the scene. Additional victims also came forward, emboldened by the mounting evidence and willing to testify about similar attacks they had endured at Marcus's hands. Each new revelation painted a clearer picture of a man who thrived on exploiting fear and vulnerability, leaving a trail of pain wherever he went. Back in Willow Creek, the town grappled with the aftermath of the scandal. Conversations buzzed in coffee shops, grocery stores, and school hallways as residents debated what had happened and why. Many expressed sympathy for Lily, acknowledging the courage it must have taken to admit her mistake publicly. Others, however, struggled to forgive her, viewing her initial accusation as reckless and irresponsible. The divide between supporters and critics widened, turning neighbors against each other and testing the bonds that once united the community. For Emma and Lily, repairing their relationship became a priority. Though they had always been close, The stress of the investigation had strained their connection to the breaking point. Now, with the truth laid bare, they focused on rebuilding trust. Late-night talks replaced heated arguments, and shared moments of laughter helped mend old wounds. Still, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between them, a shift she feared might never fully heal. Meanwhile, Daniel wrestled with his own emotions. While he appreciated Lily's apology, he couldn't ignore the toll the ordeal had taken on his personal and professional life. Sleepless nights gave way to restless days as he pondered how easily the justice system could fail, even for someone like him, who had devoted his career to upholding it. Determined to channel his frustration into action, Daniel announced plans to advocate for reforms aimed at preventing wrongful accusations and ensuring fair treatment for all parties involved in similar cases. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Willow Creek, Daniel found himself sitting alone on the porch of his rented cabin. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of nearby trees, offering a rare moment of peace amidst the chaos. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, he realized that while the scars of this experience would remain, they also carried lessons worth learning. Justice, he concluded, wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing. It was about understanding human frailty, confronting uncomfortable truths, and striving for fairness, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Across town, Lily sat at her desk, staring at a blank page in her journal. Writing had always been her way of processing emotions, but tonight, the words refused to flow. Instead, she let her mind wander back to the events of the past few weeks, the fear, the guilt, the shame, and wondered if she would ever truly forgive herself. Yet amid the turmoil, a small spark of hope flickered within her. Perhaps, she thought, this painful chapter could become a catalyst for growth. If nothing else, she vowed to use her voice to raise awareness about the importance of truthful reporting and victim support, hoping to prevent others from making the same mistakes she had. As darkness settled over Willow Creek, the town seemed quieter than usual, a reflection of the introspection gripping its residents. The road ahead promised to be long and arduous, filled with challenges yet unseen. But for the first time in weeks, there was a sense that healing was possible. Truth, though painful, had begun to pierce through the fog of confusion and mistrust. And though scars would remain, they served as reminders of resilience, a testament to the strength required to confront adversity head-on and emerge stronger on the other side. The weeks that followed were transformative for everyone involved, as the town of Willow Creek slowly began to rebuild itself from the cracks left by the scandal. The arrest and subsequent trial of Marcus Reed brought closure to many victims, who had suffered in silence for years. His predatory behavior, once hidden in shadows, was now exposed under the harsh light of justice. For Lily, Daniel, Sheriff Emma Hayes, and even the townsfolk, this period marked a turning point, a chance to reflect, heal, and grow. Marcus's trial became a landmark case, drawing attention not just locally, but across the state. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence against him. DNA matches from the torn fabric found in his possession, surveillance footage placing him near the rusty spur, and testimonies from multiple women recounting similar attacks. Each story painted a chilling portrait of a man who preyed on vulnerability, using intimidation and violence to silence his victims. In court, Lily bravely took the stand, recounting her experience that fateful night with trembling honesty. Though it was painful to relive those moments, she knew her testimony could help ensure Marcus never hurt anyone again. When the verdict came down, guilty on all charges, the courtroom erupted into murmurs of relief. Marcus Reed was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, a decision met with quiet satisfaction by those he had wronged. For Lily, hearing the judge's words felt like lifting an immense weight off her shoulders. It wasn't just about holding Marcus accountable. It was about reclaiming a sense of safety she hadn't realized she'd lost. But while justice had been served, the scars remained. For Daniel Cross, the ordeal had fundamentally changed how he viewed the legal system he had dedicated his life to serving. Despite being exonerated, he couldn't shake the memory of how quickly public opinion had turned against him. He had always believed in the fairness of the courts, but now he understood how easily truth could be obscured by perception. Determined to make a difference, Daniel launched a statewide initiative aimed at improving transparency in sexual assault cases. He advocated for reforms such as mandatory training for law enforcement officers on handling sensitive accusations, better support systems for both accusers and defendants, and stricter protocols for verifying alibis. Daniel also made a conscious effort to reconnect with colleagues and friends who had distanced themselves during the height of the scandal. Some relationships were harder to repair than others, but he approached each conversation with humility and gratitude. Over time, people began to see him not as the embattled prosecutor, but as the man he had always been, a champion for justice, who refused to let adversity define him. His resilience inspired many, including young lawyers eager to learn from his experiences. For Sheriff Emma Hayes, the aftermath of the case reinforced her belief in the importance of integrity and diligence. She had faced criticism from some quarters for allowing her daughter's accusation to gain traction before uncovering the truth, but most residents respected her commitment to finding answers, no matter where they led. The incident prompted her to implement new procedures within her department, emphasizing thorough investigations and open communication with the community. She also organized workshops for local schools and civic groups, teaching them about the dangers of jumping to conclusions and the value of critical thinking. Lily, meanwhile, embarked on a journey of self-discovery and redemption. Admitting her mistake publicly had been one of the hardest things she'd ever done, but it also gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She channeled her guilt into advocacy work, collaborating with organizations focused on supporting survivors of sexual assault and promoting truthful reporting. Through speaking engagements and social media campaigns, she shared her story, not to excuse her error, but to highlight the complexities surrounding accusations and the importance of due process. Her relationship with her mother improved significantly as well. The tension that had strained their bond during the investigation gradually gave way to deeper understanding and trust. They spent more time together, sharing meals, long walks, and heartfelt conversations. Emma encouraged Lily to pursue her passion for writing, reminding her that creativity could be a powerful tool for healing. Inspired by this advice, Lily started working on a memoir about her experience, weaving personal reflections with lessons learned along the way. As for the town itself, Willow Creek emerged stronger and wiser from the ordeal. The scandal forced residents to confront uncomfortable truths about bias, gossip, and the fragility of trust. While some friendships had been irreparably damaged, others grew stronger through shared adversity. Community meetings became forums for open dialogue, fostering empathy and unity. Slowly but surely, the divisions that had fractured the town began to mend. One crisp autumn evening, several months after Marcus Reed's sentencing, the Hayes family hosted a small gathering at their home. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues mingled in the backyard, enjoying food, laughter, and music under a canopy of twinkling string lights. At one point, Emma stood up to address the crowd, raising a glass in a toast. "To second chances," she said, her voice warm but tinged with emotion. "We've all been tested these past few months in ways we didn't expect and sometimes didn't want, but I believe we're better for it, stronger, kinder, and more aware of the power of truth." Her words resonated deeply with everyone present. As glasses clinked and cheers rang out, Daniel caught Lily's eye across the yard. He smiled softly, nodding in acknowledgement of everything they had endured and overcome together. For the first time in what felt like forever, hope filled the air, carrying with it the promise of brighter days ahead. In the end, the story of Willow Creek wasn't just about mistakes or misjudgments. It was about courage, the courage to admit fault, seek forgiveness, and fight for what was right. It was about recognizing that justice isn't perfect, but striving for fairness is worth every struggle. And it was about remembering that even in the darkest moments there is always room for growth, redemption, and renewal. Though the scars would remain, they served as reminders, not of pain, but of resilience. Because sometimes it takes facing the worst to discover the best within ourselves. And in doing so, we find not only justice but also grace.